Hello and welcome to Talk to Downtown. My name is Courtney Wood. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Downtown Stockton Alliance, which is a 501c6 nonprofit property-based business improvement district serving downtown Stockton. This webinar series is intended to connect our business owners, property owners, visitors, and residents with the organizations, people, and resources who can help address issues which are of top concern to them. Today we have special guest, Cynthia Marsh. She's here. She's a senior planner in advanced planning at the City of Stockton. And we're going to learn all about the housing element update and housing action plan that's coming to the City of Stockton. So we'll begin by having Cynthia share a little bit about her background and her role at the city. Then I will go ahead and ask a list of questions that I've outlined for her. And at the end, we will open it up to viewers to go ahead and ask your questions. So if you do have a question, please be sure to type it in as a comment and we will get to it towards the end of the live stream. So welcome Cynthia. Thank you so much for being here, being our guest. I'm really excited to learn more about all of the great work that you guys are doing. So please share a little bit about your background and your role at the City of Stockton.
Great, thanks for having me. Good morning. As Courtney mentioned, I'm Cynthia Marsh. I'm a senior planner in the City of Stockton's Community Development Department in the Advanced Planning Division, which is located inside the Permit Center across from City Hall downtown. I've been in my role with the city. It's changed a little bit over the years. For almost 15 years total, I've worked for the city. I started as an assistant planner in 2007 in community development. And then with the city's bankruptcy, I shifted over to the redevelopment agency. And after the redevelopment agencies were abolished across the state, I then moved over to the Economic Development Department's Housing Division, where I ministered CDBG programs, HUD programs, funds for homelessness, affordable housing. And after attending law school at night, I left the city for 1 year and went to the Department of Housing and Community Development, worked for the state in housing policy enforcement. And then I came back to this department 2.5 years ago, where my focus now is on zoning code updates, housing policy development, and long-range plans in the Advanced Planning Division.
Amazing. So you have a lot of experience, a lot of different departments, a lot of areas of expertise. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the background. So can you now, for anyone who's unfamiliar, can you give us an overview of the work of the department that you're in now?
Sure. As I mentioned, I'm in the Permit Center, so where the Community Development Department is located across from City Hall. Community Development Department is comprised of planning and engineering, which administers the city's general plan, development codes, and approves projects from the planning and engineering perspective, which in a nutshell includes everything from how tall your fence can be to how to subdivide a property. It's very broad. Also, there's the Building and Life Safety Division, is where you would go to get a building permit if you're going to remodel your building or your house, or if you want to construct something. And then we also are comprised of the Business Operations Division, which manages our online permitting systems, finances, and public facilities fees. So those fees collected for things like building parks and libraries and street improvements.
Okay, so a lot of things are involved in this department, a lot of smaller branches within it. Is there anything that you think people might be surprised to know about the work that you do?
Sure, I think people would be surprised to know that we are very lean. For a city of over 300,000 people, we have a very small staff who work very hard to maintain exceptional customer service levels, even though they are all constantly busy. But we have a really great team, but a very small team for such a large city.
Can you give us maybe a number for your team? How big is your team?
I believe the entire Community Development Department, including building, engineering, planning, business ops, has roughly 50 people. If you were to compare that to, say, the city of Sacramento, which has a population of over 500,000, I think they have more people in just their planning division than we do in our department.
Wow. Okay, so I see what you're saying about a lean staff.
Yeah, we're pretty small.
Small, but very skilled.
Small but mighty.
Exactly.
Small but mighty.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the responsibilities of your specific role within this department?
Sure. So I'm in the planning division and specifically advanced planning. We have current planning and advanced planning, two arms of the planning division, where essentially advanced planning is the policy arm of planning. We manage general plan updates, changes to the development code, general plan and zoning map designations, neighborhood planning, implementation of state housing laws, but we also process some projects. Generally, projects are handled at the counter by our current planning folks, but advanced planning might handle projects that are larger that require something like annexation into the city limits, or if there's a large project with a development agreement, we might handle those larger projects that require something extra than just a typical permit.
Okay. And earlier this year, we had your counterpart, Tristan Osborn, who also is a senior planner. He was sharing with us all the zoning updates that he had been working on. So how does your work kind of overlap with the work of Tristan?
Sure. Tristan and I are both senior planners in advanced planning, so a lot of our work overlaps. Tristan's working on the neighborhood plans, which he discussed in the session that he had with DSA a month or two ago. And both of these efforts are funded from state funds. So the Housing Element Housing Action Plan that I will talk to you about in a moment is funded with local early action planning grant funds, or LEAP funds, from the state of California. And then the neighborhoods that Tristan is working on are funded by REAP funds, which are regional early action planning grants that ultimately came from the state of California, but they were handed down to our local COGS, so San Joaquin Council of Governments.
All right.
So same funding source, ultimately meant to create more housing in the state of California.
Which is something we definitely need. Desperately need.
For sure.
And so a part of some of the work that you're doing has been focused on the housing element update, and that's one of the things we'll talk about today. So can you please share with anyone who's maybe unfamiliar with what that is or what that even means, what exactly is the housing element and why is it important?
Sure. The housing element is a document that since the 1960s, all jurisdictions in the state of California have been required to plan to meet the housing needs of everyone in their community. It's an element of the city's general plan, but it's required by the state. General plan is often referred to as like the blueprint for how the city will grow, and the housing element is one of the several elements of the general plan. It's updated every 8 years, and it requires the city to put in place regulatory systems to provide opportunities for housing development at all income levels and housing types. So in a nutshell, it requires the city to sort of set the table to meet the housing needs of their citizens, but it doesn't require cities to actually construct housing. However, you may have heard recently, or a few years back, 2017, there was the state's housing package, which really expanded the state's ability to enforce how local jurisdictions implement their housing elements. And so there have been a lot of changes in housing elements over the last 5 years that are really proactive towards getting housing built. So as part of this, I want to mention, get folks involved in the community. Our website where we are keeping track of these efforts is www.stocktonca.gov/shape Stockton. So Shape Stockton is really the umbrella of these really exciting efforts we're doing. As we mentioned, the neighborhood plans that Tristan's working on, the housing element, housing action plan. And then we have our planning manager, Matt Diaz, is also processing a development code update and objective design standards. So they're all kind of this umbrella that are hosted on our website where everyone can get involved and stay kind of up to track with what our progress is and, give us feedback and attend workshops.
Amazing. Yes, I know actually you have one of those workshops this evening, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. So if you go to the website I mentioned, you can sign up to attend the virtual workshop. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. tonight. If you miss it, that's fine. We're going to record it and post it on our website, and we'll have several more workshops in the coming months.
Great. And as far as who could attend these workshops and what could they expect, can you give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Sure. Anyone can attend, any member of the public. You can attend the virtual workshop. If you want to attend an in-person workshop, we'll be having one coming up for the housing element on October 19th. That will be at Van Buskirk, also from 5 to 7 p.m. We have a development code workshop coming up on a weekend, September 24th. It's a Saturday. That will be held at Stribley Community Center from 10 to 12 in the morning. So you can attend in person, or you can submit comments via email. You can submit comments through our website. You can sign up for newsletter updates. And we just want folks to get involved. So tonight, the specific topic will be our land inventory piece of the housing element. And the land inventory is required by state law for the city to designate sites, basically we need to zone sites for the capacity to handle all the anticipated housing requirements at all income levels across the city.
Interesting. So are you looking just for public opinion on where they think these sites should be?
Sure, they can give us feedback. So you can go in, we'll have, I think our map will be posted hopefully today. If not, we will share the link for it in the meeting tonight. We'll have a mapping tool. And so you can go into the map and literally type in an APN or an address into the map, and you can see the sites highlighted where we are anticipated designating a site for housing. It doesn't mean housing is necessarily going to be built on that site. It's just that site is zoned to enable housing. It's not a requirement that it's built there. It's just the city has to set the stage sort of to enable that housing to be built. In addition to that, and we'll talk in a moment, I believe, about the housing action plan, we have our housing action plan priority sites that we're starting to sort of whittle down, and I can talk a little bit about those in depth in a moment. But basically, yeah, they can give feedback on those sites. And then the meeting in October, we're going to really start digging into the housing policies on October 19th, and what are the issues with fair housing issues and displacement and those sort of things that we need to evaluate and look at.
All right, awesome. So it's a chance for you guys, members of the public, to go ahead and share your opinion with the city on where you think housing should go, and also what types of housing might be needed. So great opportunity, and we are sharing that on all of our platforms, and we're also going to share it as a link here today. Okay,
Awesome.
So thanks for giving us an overview of what the housing element update kind of is or looks like. I have a couple questions about the details of it. So for this update, how much of it is determined by state law directly, as opposed to local conditions or maybe local ordinances?
Sure. A lot of the housing element really is prescriptive and is required by state law. So when the state Department of Housing and Community Development reviews our housing element, when we submit it to them for review, they literally have a checklist that they go through. I believe it's Government Code 65883 or 65583. If you want to look at what the specific requirements are, it gets very technical as far as what the requirements are, but you can also peruse HCD's website. I believe it's hcd.gov or ca.gov. If you Google HCD, you can find their website. You can look around at what the requirements are. They have building blocks on their website where you can see what those various pieces are. As far as the amount that local government conditions kind of input into that plan, local conditions really come in with the programs, I think, more so than the kind of checklist and prescriptive nature of the housing element and the housing inventory. So the programs are more like, what are the specific policies or ordinances that a local government can implement? For example, would it be necessary, say there's this jurisdiction that has no land available, which is not the case in Stockton. So maybe that jurisdiction needs to increase their density of their zoning in their downtown area because they don't allow dense enough or tall enough buildings to enable the number of housing units that will be required in that jurisdiction. So then the state would encourage that jurisdiction to implement a program to say, hey, we promise that we will implement an ordinance that will increase the density in the downtown or increase the height. In Stockton, we don't really have a lot of those issues that local jurisdictions such as those on perhaps the coastal cities would have, where they don't have as much land or they have other restrictions as far as development goes. So we're actually pretty progressive in the city of Stockton. We really want housing developers to come here. So a lot of these programs we have already implemented, but we're still looking for outside the box kind of solutions for other programs that we can continue to implement.
Interesting. And when you're saying programs, is that then related to the element itself, the element update, or is that part of the action plan that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So programs would be our required part of the housing element. And the state has actually specific programs that are required. So there's a handful of them that are listed out in the government code. Let's say every city must allow, for example, homeless shelters to be allowed by right in certain zoning districts. So the city has already implemented those sort of required programs. The housing element is updated every 8 years, and different cities are in different kind of cycles so that the Department of Housing and Community Development isn't overwhelmed with reviewing all of the city's housing elements for the entire state.
Mm.
Excuse me. However, when the 8-year cycle comes about, which ours is now, we are now in the 6th cycle. So with that 6th cycle, there are all the new requirements from the 2017 housing package that are coming down the pipeline. But our department has a really great team, and we've worked on a lot of housing elements outside of the city. And so I think we had that kind of knowledge base already established and knew what was coming, what the requirements were. So over the past 2 years, we've already implemented a lot of those potential solutions. So, for example, we have already implemented 100% density bonus ordinance. So for affordable housing, state law formerly only required up to a 35% density bonus, and they upped that to 50% in 2022.
Wow.
But we allow up to 100% density
Wow.
bonus with affordable housing in the city of Stockton. So that's pretty progressive. And then we also eliminated any off-site housing parking requirements for housing around the A station. So if you're a quarter mile around the A station, because we're all stationed downtown, you don't have to provide parking for your housing project. We also greatly reduced parking requirements in the downtown core, the greater downtown, for affordable projects and multifamily projects to try to encourage those projects to be developed. There's a lot of other steps we've taken that are kind of proactive, including allowing housing in all of our commercial zoning districts, including the CL zone, which would include our mall. So in this last round, the city council adopted our ordinance to allow housing in the CL, which is commercial large district zoning. As long as the housing is on the 2nd floor or above, they can have an entrance on the 1st floor. So you can keep your mall, but on the upper floors of Target or the mall, you can build housing. If it pencils out, if there's a developer that wants to do it, we're allowing it. So we're really trying to think outside the box and enable housing in any way we can.
Interesting. Okay, so you answered a few of my questions. You were saying this update occurs approximately every 8 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, every 8 years. So every city is on an 8-year cycle. And this is our 6th cycle for the city of Stockton, and all the jurisdictions in the valley are on the 8-year 6th cycle that will be coming up, kicking off right about now.
Okay. And it sounded like from your description that most of this is coming from the state. All of the requirements are coming from the state. So would you say that there are minimums that they're setting? And you were just sharing that the city has gone above and beyond in certain cases or for certain aspects of it. So would you say that the state is just kind of setting minimum standards?
Yeah, for sure. With the 2017 housing package and following legislation following that, there's been a lot of changes to state law. Housing elements have been around since the 1960s, but they didn't really have any type of enforcement. So I think the city of Stockton, we really want, housing here, so we're much more progressive, but there's a lot of cities across the state that don't really follow the rules, or they say they're going to do something, they don't. They say they're going to designate, such and such site as affordable housing, but then when a developer comes in and wants to build affordable housing, they don't allow it. Or they, they create requirements such as, we only allow 2-story buildings in our downtown, or we require 3 parking stalls per 1-unit, 1-bedroom apartment, which are sort of ridiculous, right? So we've kind of gone the opposite way in Stockton, where we say, hey, let's cut out any of those, obstacles for developers to try to, attract them here. And we're not just coming up with this stuff on our own. We have consultants that are working with us on our housing element, housing action plan. We have PlaceWorks and BAE, who are planning and economic consultants, and they're really knowledgeable and work with jurisdictions across the state. We're interviewing developers, both nonprofit and for-profit, because frankly, we don't just want to attract affordable housing. We want all income levels.
Exactly.
So we also want market rate housing. there's a shortage of housing, as we all know, across the entire
Yes.
state. So there's a housing crisis. Prices are, insane. And so we don't want to just attract those affordable developers, because the theory is, there's been evidence to show that if you build that higher income housing, everyone kind of moves up the chain, right? So those
Interesting.
folks who were in a 1-bedroom apartment or might get a new job, and now they can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And as you're expanding the kind of availability, the quantity of housing units, the prices are going to start dropping. So we're trying to hopefully attract them, as quickly as possible. We've had a little hiccup with interest rates kind of going up in the last couple months, and inflation causing some projects to slow down. So, we're trying to think outside the box and, how to solve those, and working with our economic development department, who deals with more of the financial aspects. So in community development, we're setting the policy side and setting the table to enable those developers to come in. And then our economic development department, housing division, is going out and trying to attract those developers to say, hey, come to Stockton, because these are all, the things that we've done to, proactively enable housing.
Interesting. So you kind of shared a little bit. We all do know that there are challenges in terms of housing access for, lots of different people from all kinds of communities. I have had prior guests who shared that as well. So in your opinion, can you share a little bit about what you see as current housing challenges, but also opportunities for our community?
Sure. I think a big one is that we, because by our nature being in the valley, we are more affordable, even if we don't think it's affordable at this time, but we're more affordable to folks in the Bay Area. So we're attracting a lot of commuters who are moving here and increasing prices, driving prices up for the folks who already live here. So the jobs housing balance is really important. So our counterpart over in economic development, they're really working hard to attract, quality employers to come, not just the developers to build housing, but they're looking at getting the jobs here. So they're, trying to think outside the box, and, what's the best way to attract employers of all shapes and sizes and income levels, and, what are we missing? So they also have consultants and university specific working on sort of an economic analysis. How do they attract that sort of that missing income level in the middle, where, it's maybe the trades and that sort of level. One of the solutions that we've implemented in the last year to hopefully address that is by creating a hybrid industrial commercial zone. And that would allow some of those kind of more high-tech quasi-industrial, sort of like industrial light. We jokingly call it hipster industrial. So it might be, like a winery or a brewery, or microchips or biotech companies. So these are the areas in town that used to be heavy industrial, but now they're adjacent to homes. And so we're trying to create this buffer of kind of the non-dirty industrial by enabling more of those kind of high-tech but quasi-industrial uses.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be amazing to bring, different types of employers to this area. We really could benefit from that, 100%. So you shared a couple of changes that you guys have already begun working on in terms of the housing element update. Are there any other specific changes that you can share with us?
I think one of the big things that changed that came down from the state level was there's a lot of emphasis on fair housing. And so as part of our housing element and housing action plan, we've also hired enterprise community partners to do a displacement and gentrification study. So that will be kind of enveloped in this package of the work we're doing. I believe Enterprise is out interviewing folks in the last couple of weeks. So talking to stakeholders and finding out really what are the issues with displacement, and really examining like what are the fair housing issues, and how can we strengthen those risks of displacement, or what are the solutions that we need to be looking at and implementing.
I think that's really important, especially based upon what you shared earlier, which is how prices are being, scaled up so high in our area that many of us who have lived here for maybe our whole life, we maybe can no longer afford to live here. So it's very,
For sure.
it's a very interesting situation. All right, so how does the policy change that you're working on impact the availability of housing directly or the development? I know that you shared that you're trying to recruit developers, but how would you say that it directly impacts development?
Excuse me. I think generally Stockton is so forward thinking with our housing policies in the last couple of years that we're hoping that those policies can lay the groundwork for attracting developers. But frankly, we need to find funding sources to get those developers in. So we want to increase the capacity, but there may be hindrances to doing that. If it might be on a site or it might be in a neighborhood where there's outdated infrastructure. So maybe the infrastructure is there. For example, if you're building a housing project that has 100 units and there used to be 2 single-family homes on the site, the sewer lines are not going to handle that 100 units. So it's looking at through our outside the box kind of research and through the housing action plan, looking at how can we fund some of those improvements. Are there grants available? There's a lot of funding coming down from the federal government and the state. And so it's looking at really where can we connect those funding sources with developers and leverage kind of all of those pieces, right? Because we can only, upzone the density so much. We can only do so many things. I think another area that I wanted to mention about the housing element that we've already implemented also is ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. That's really an opportunity to increase housing. I built one myself. I converted my garage to a 495 square foot apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, and my parents live in it now. And we've really seen an uptick in ADUs. We allow in a single family zone, you can build an ADU plus a JADU, which is a junior accessory dwelling unit. You can look on the community development department's website. We have information on there on our ADU policies, or you can give me a call or email me also, or our current planning folks. Our building division has also prepared free plans for ADUs in 3 different sets. These would be new builds, not conversions. So if you are doing a conversion to an ADU, you would need to get the same permits you would need for a remodeling project. There's some really exciting aspects to doing ADU development is that we don't charge the PFF fees or the public facility fees that we would on a new construction of a new single family home.
Interesting.
There's a lot of perks and benefits, and we can get a lot of these units built. There's a lot of properties in the city, so that can handle ADUs. It's just a matter of getting them financed. So if you have equity in your house, a lot of people are taking out second mortgages or loans on their homes to finance them, because they roughly run plus or minus about $100,000 in Stockton right now to do a conversion or a new build. So one of the things we need to look at, and that I think the state is looking at too, is how do we fund ADU development, because that's really a point of housing production that we could increase. It may be one-offs here and there, but so far I think in the first 6 months from January to June 2022, we've had 43 permits for ADUs in the city. So it's gone up. Yeah, since last year, I think we're on track to about double what we did in 2021, which is really awesome.
Interesting. So do you think that the changes that have been made to these policies are what has led to that uptick, or do you think it's something else?
For sure. Previously, several years ago, before the state changed the ADU law statewide, the city of Stockton, if you wanted to build an ADU or granny unit, whatever you want to call it, you had to have a 2-car garage for your single family home, in addition to a garage for the ADU.
Oh my goodness.
That's a huge, huge bonus there. So state law says you do not have to replace parking for your ADU construction or conversion. So for example, I converted my garage. My house was built in 1927, so my 2-car garage was not precisely a full 2-car garage, but you can convert your garage and you do not need to replace that garage. So that's really cool and can really help folks who, especially as, all the boomers are aging. My parents are baby boomers, and folks are retiring and wanting to downsize, and, multi-generational living is becoming more of a thing as housing prices are going up. So I think it's a really neat solution for not only increasing, our housing production, but as far as affordable housing goes. So hopefully coming down the pipeline, there'll be some really neat funding sources from the state, and hopefully those will trickle down to the city to get some of these built or increase in building them.
Very interesting. Okay, so the changes really are making it a little easier for people to create units or add units to existing buildings, but you're kind of having a bit of a struggle finding funding for anyone who might be interested in doing a development project, it sounds like.
Yeah, okay. So hopefully we'll have news in the coming year or two. There'll be some changes there.
All right, and I know that these updates that you're working on, they apply to the whole city. Are there any of them that are specific to downtown?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on what your zoning is. So the capacity to build housing is clearly, there's such an opportunity downtown. It's an untapped resource. We have so much, not just land available, but vacant buildings for adaptive reuse. So our council in the last 6 months adopted an adaptive reuse update to our infill section of our development code that would enable an adaptive reuse project, say in the downtown, to go in and do housing but not have to provide additional parking. So if there's whatever parking is on site, if it's 2 parking stalls and you're doing a conversion that's 100 units, you don't have to provide additional parking.
Oh, wow.
So that's really cool, an update that we've had. That would be specific to the downtown core, and we've reduced parking, as I mentioned, for the greater downtown area. So it really depends on the capacity through the type of zoning. If you're in a single family neighborhood that's low density, you're going to be looking at, ADUs or duplexes. We do allow in our single family zoning districts, which is called RL, residential low density, we do allow duplex development. So theoretically, you could develop a duplex in a single family neighborhood and add an ADU behind it and a JADU, so you could theoretically have 4 units. Under state law, there's also SB 9, which went into effect in 2022, and SB 9 allows subdivision with 2 duplexes of single family parcels. So you could go in to a single family, if it's, there's minimum size limits for subdivision, but you could basically split the property. There's some requirements. The owner, I believe, has to live in one of the units, and it's deed restricted to some extent. But so there's a lot of things, kind of pieces moving, and a lot of solutions that are coming down the pipeline, and some that we've already implemented. But it really depends on what your zoning district is. So there's so much potential in the downtown with its higher densities, and we can really do a lot of more high-rise apartments down there. It's just whether we can find the developers and whether that those developments will pencil out. So it's helping them, enabling them to find the funding sources, and where can we, loosen our policies to enable them to get there. If we're requiring a parking garage to be built for an apartment complex in the downtown, that's going to kill the project. So it's like, we need parking because their parking garages are very expensive. So it's like, where can we, help them, enable them to get that housing built?
Interesting. With the parking requirements kind of being reduced, I do wonder, do you feel that the city may step in and add additional public parking garages? If we get a lot more high density residential kind of complexes being created?
I think that would be a question for our economic development folks.
Yeah.
So I would not be in the loop on that. But, just from a parking perspective, I think I've heard in the past that our parking garages are fairly empty a lot of the time. So if you get people living in the downtown, there's a kind of shared parking concept where if you have people who are there at night and sleeping in their homes, they can park there, and as they leave for the day, they leave for work, they leave the parking garage, and then the people are coming into, work downtown or parking in the parking garage. So there's like a kind of equilibrium and a balance. So we are, I believe, as part of our development code update that Matt Diaz is working on, doing a parking study. And so it'll be exciting. So we don't quite know what those answers are yet, or what the main issues are, but we're starting to look at them. So the answer is, I don't know, but
Yeah.
we hope to know in the coming year or two as we go through the process.
I'm excited to hear that there is a parking study coming about. That's something I think that's extremely needed. We've been hearing about parking since I first started working at the DSA, so that's actually really exciting. I love to hear the results of that once it's finished. Okay, so with these the housing element updates, when can we expect the changes to take effect, or have they already taken effect?
Sure, no, we're just kicking off. So our first housing element inventory meeting is tonight, and housing action plan sites mapping tool kind of presentation is tonight. The whole process will take us about 1 to 2 years. So over those coming months, we'll hold several community workshops. We'll be interviewing stakeholders, and the sites inventory draft, which we're meeting about tonight, won't be available for a couple of months, but we do have the public kind of the really rough draft out there. So it's available for public comment starting tonight. And then the draft of the final document will be available during spring 2023. And then that draft will be sent to the state housing and community development department for review and comment. And after the city addresses all of those comments, the final draft would go to planning commission in fall 2023 and city council for adoption in December 2023. That would be the final adoption date, and it would go into effect in early 24.
Okay, so you've got quite a while until it officially takes effect. A lot of time for feedback, for revising. Okay, thank you.
We want the public to get involved, so definitely check out stocktonca.gov/shape-stockton. That's our kind of main placeholder. You can see all the ways to get involved and just stay up to date and sign up for our email list.
Awesome. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about the housing element update, which is more about setting policies and guidelines for developers. Now, can you please share with us, what is the housing action plan? What does that involve?
Sure. So the housing element, is required by state law. It's very prescriptive. It's kind of a check the box you have to do certain things. The housing action plan is a completely new outside the box effort to facilitate more housing development. So like we have same consultants on the housing element, we have those consultants working on the housing action plan because there's a little bit of overlap. It's more of an implementation document. So we've brought on SiteWorks and BAE to evaluate economic viability of targeted sites. And these targeted sites would be prime for housing. So they're going to be a lot different than the housing element inventory, which would have several hundred sites citywide. These would be sites that we really want to make a priority, where we can leverage funding or resources to attract housing development. So we might whittle those sites down to, say, 50 or 20 sites. We're not sure, kind of once we get down. And there's certain criteria and parameters that we're looking at. So, are they close to transit, or resources such as grocery stores or schools? Are they, how are they ranked on the Cal EnviroScreen? Pollution levels and walkability levels and that sort of thing. Does the city own the site, or a government agency own the site? So all those will kind of be brought together to create a list of priority sites that we will take out to developers, and BAE will be creating pro formas for us. So each site might have a small kind of mini package, or like a 1-page or 2-page pro forma, and say, hey, we've evaluated the site. These are the issues. It may have some environmental issues, so we need to go out and get a brownfield grant. Or it may need infrastructure improvements. We need to go out and find infrastructure money, or what have you. And so they'll look at, a BAE will look at the site through their pro forma lens and say, okay, what pencils out? Is it a 2-story medium multifamily, medium density, or is it a 4-story or 5-story or 10-story? What pencils out on this site? And so that's one piece of the housing action plan. The other is kind of just looking at the broader policies that we are missing. So it's more of an implementation plan, but also a toolkit for not just developers, but also city staff, city council members, planning commissioners, community members. So it's kind of like, let's bring everyone together and come up with the best ideas. So we're talking to, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, lenders, community members, stakeholders, kind of everybody, realtors. What are we missing, and how can we get housing in Stockton? So it's more of a realistic, but it's a very new document. Like, what can we, frankly, really do? Where are the gaps? What are we missing? So if you know of anything that would be outside the box, please contact us and let us know if you have any ideas. One of the things we're looking at too is housing trust funds, which the San Joaquin Council of Governments has hired a consultant to look at creating a regional housing trust fund. So what are the solutions there? So there's a lot of kind of moving parts, and we're just kicking it off. We're starting to look at them all. So the housing action plan will probably be done on a timeline a little bit shorter than the housing element, because we control the process and we want to get housing built as soon as possible. So
Definitely.
Where are the gaps? What are the solutions? How can we go out and solve these problems?
Okay. Very interesting to hear, because I know a lot of times we have feasibility studies or, policy changes, but the question is always, okay, what does this mean action-wise? Like, how are we going to execute? So I love that you guys are working on a document like that and a plan. I do have a question about recruiting. So, like, specifically recruiting developers. What kind of tactics or strategies are you planning to implement to do that? How are you guys planning to bring them here?
It's a challenge. A couple years ago, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, I spoke at a brownfields conference, and I presented our South Point project, which is on the South Shore of the waterfront, and we had recently issued an RFP. We had issued multiple RFPs for the site, and there was a panel of infill developers there who specialized in brownfields redevelopment, and it was basically like a Shark Tank style presentation, asking them, please tell us, the city of Stockton, what we can do. And they said, it's really difficult in the valley to attract outside developers to come in. So they suggested focusing on assisting the developers that we have here, because generally, a lot, folks who've grown up in Stockton really care about their city, and they're willing to take more risk, or people who live here are willing to take more financial risk as a developer, because it's really difficult, especially with inflation, interest rates changing, and kind of all these moving parts, for a developer to come from across the country and come to Stockton and say, well, we have a little bit lower income levels, and we don't have, really established housing market in the downtown or on the waterfront. So no one wants to be the first. So it's really hard to attract someone from outside. Having said that, we do have a developer for the South Point project that economic development is negotiating with. They did issue another RFP in 2020, and they are in talks with them. And they did receive, I believe, about $5 million for cleanup, a grant cleanup to clean up the site. Great. So that's really exciting that it's finally moving forward, because a lot of these sites we've been working on for years and trying to find solutions, and so a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts, for a lot of things are finally starting to come together for some of these sites. But that's part of our process with the housing action plan, is going in and looking at these sites. So what's missing? So we've had this site, maybe the city owns it, or maybe another government agency owns it. How can we get a developer onto this site, and what's the best strategy to that? So we don't know all the answers yet. We're looking to hopefully finding those answers through the housing action plan. And so if, like I said, if anyone has any suggestions, please contact us. And we're sort of beating the bushes, interviewing and talking to anyone we can think of, and looking at other cities and other jurisdictions, other states, other countries even. What have they done to encourage redevelopment, especially in areas that have, some of the struggles that we do in the valley and lower income levels. So how can we get those projects to pencil out? It's really challenging. So we have a tough job ahead of us, but I think our department likes a challenge.
Yes. Very interesting. I love that you are also looking outside of the city. I do feel like sometimes it seems that we have tunnel vision, we're looking just at what's here, but there's so many other examples and communities that are similar to us that we can draw so much from. So I love that you guys are doing that. Okay, so When is the anticipated end date or completion date of this action plan? I know you said it would be shorter than the element update. Do you have any kind of goal in mind?
Yeah, so the housing action plan would be spring 23, so roughly around like March, April-ish. That could change, so don't hold me to it, but roughly spring 23 is our goal. Because our efforts that we're implementing right now are from grant-funded sources, those grant funds have strict deadlines with which to spend the funds. We've heard there might be a one-year extension for LEAP and REAP grants, so that could give us a little more breathing room. But right now, all of our funding sources have to be invoiced by mid-2023. So we're looking to, get most of the work done by then.
Okay, 2023. So now that you've shared with us about both the element update and the action plan, I would like to sum it up and ask, what kind of impact do you believe that both of these projects will have on building and economic development in downtown Stockton specifically?
Well, I think downtown it'll really help address the gaps. A lot of our sites through the housing action plan, I think, will be in the downtown or near greater downtown area, because frankly, a lot of those priority sites are sites that the city might own or the former redevelopment agency owned are in the downtown. For example, there's a site on Lafayette, just south of the Crosstown Freeway, adjacent to the Gleason Park and Gleason Park development area. And so sites like that, we can hopefully go in and leverage and attract a developer by finding out what the gaps are and finding the solutions for that parcel. So, that parcel in particular, I'm not familiar with the exact issues with it, but say, for example, it had a brownfields issue. We could say, okay, then we're going to choose this site and we're going to go and apply to the EPA for a brownfields cleanup grant.
Right.
And so through that process, we can kind of identify those issues, or maybe it's a matter of saying, hey, we just need to study the site and perform a phase 1 environmental analysis. A phase 1 would be just a basic, study the site. What's the history of the site? Was there a dry cleaner? Is there, or an auto, mechanic that leaked oil on the site? Maybe there's some issues that we need to look at, but they're not as big as, completely toxicity on a site or something. Maybe it's just something minor that can go in and just a basic study needs to be done. So through this project, we might fund some of those, phase 1s or just initial examinations of the site. So really a lot of those sites that are in the downtown kind of have that history of, brownfields issues.
Yes.
There are also a lot of issues with infrastructure in the downtown and South Stockton, Airport Way, Gleason Park area, around the A station, north and south shores of the waterfront. So that's another huge gap. And there are future funding sources coming down the pipeline.
Awesome.
That we're looking at, including REAP 2.0, so the Regional Early Action Planning Grant that was issued through SJCOG has a second round, REAP 2.0. So that's something we're looking at with our public works folks and saying, hey, do we need to address infrastructure proactively to get a developer in this area or on this site? And what are our funding sources for doing that? So it's really an exciting time. I've worked for the city for a long time, and I don't think there's ever been a time where we've had the funding to kind of go and proactively do things. We've always been trying to play catch up. So it's really cool that it's finally like that time, like it's exciting. So, we're kind of at the whim of the market, and the housing market shifts, not with the wind, but, pretty rapidly here in the Valley. So just fingers crossed that things kind of, stay stable and we can get some housing downtown. It'll be really great. Our downtown has such a historic character and is an awesome place, and part of the reason why I moved to the city 15 years ago. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're working on, building it up, revitalizing it, and you have a hands-on direct approach to doing that. I love it. Okay, so do you have any advice to give to anyone who is looking to develop housing?
I think the first thing is come and talk to us. I think sometimes we get developers from out of town who don't talk to us first and they
Right.
start going and looking at a site and they don't realize kind of the ins and outs of what might be required, and they kind of get down through their process and they haven't talked to either economic development or community development. And so, just schedule an appointment. Our economic development department does a completely free kind of pre-meeting called an ERC meeting, Economic Review Committee meeting. They bring all the departments together. So if you have, even a sketch on paper that says, hey, we're looking at the site or we're looking at buying a site and we want to do X, Y, and Z here, if you can come in and meet with us preliminarily, we can kind of walk you through, or even just give us a call. There's plenty of folks willing to talk to you and kind of walk you through what the hurdles might be or the process, or there might be some funding sources that are available, or or recently adopted code amendments, such as the adaptive reuse ordinance section of the infill ordinance. Some folks might not be familiar with that. So we can come in and say, hey, we've got these kind of tools available to help you, get into this location. And they might not realize that they're available just by a cursory look at a property.
Exactly. Definitely. Meet with the ERC, learn what the requirements will be, learn about any other things that might pop up before beginning the project.
For sure.
Great advice. Okay, I just have a couple more questions before we move on to viewer questions. So we have your contact information up here, your phone number, your email address. How else could people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about either of the projects you were talking about today, or just in general about the work that you guys do?
Sure. So we have a dedicated phone number for the whole Shape Stockton effort, which includes the neighborhood plans that Tristan's working on, housing element, housing action plan, development code, objective design standards. It's 209-937-7220. Double check is correct. And we have our website, stocktonca.gov/shape Stockton. You can also follow the city on social media. We have some updates going there, such as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, I believe. And we really want folks to get involved. We want your feedback. So you can email me directly. You can email us through the general website links. You can call me directly, or you can call our general number. Tristan, Matt, and I are always available most of the time to answer questions, and we try to get back to folks within 48 hours. So just keep in mind we're closed every other Friday with our 980 schedule. So on those Fridays, we might not return your email or call within 48 hours, but we try our best. So we really want to hear from the community, and we want people to give us feedback on what we're missing, what we can improve, and we really appreciate it, because it will really honestly form a better document in the end. We're planners, and so we're looking kind of from our planner view, and we know what works with our planneries or planner 101 kind of concepts, but there may be some specific issues or niche issues in certain neighborhoods that we need to look at that we're not aware of.
Exactly. And getting that public input is so important for kind of finding out about those things. So I think that's really important. So if anyone is available, please attend the virtual workshop tonight. Okay, one last question from me. Is there anything else you think people should know or understand about the work that you do?
That's a good question, and I don't know the specific answer. I think there's a lot of technical pieces to the work we're doing, and we try our best to make it understandable in layman's terms. Sometimes we fail at that. So I think one of the things is from our perspective is we're planning nerds, and so we speak planneries, and I think if someone is confused about something, please ask us to clarify. If you need translation services of any kind, please ask in advance. We're really trying to be proactive with this effort, with the neighborhoods and housing element and all of our upcoming workshops. We're translating flyers into 5 different languages and really trying to be more proactive to outreach the entire community. We don't just want folks in North Stockton or South Stockton or downtown to be involved. We want the entire community to kind of come together and be involved. because there's really been some gaps. And I think in the past, and certain areas have been ignored. And we really care about the city as a whole, and we really want to, the best for all of those areas. So I think we have a really great team, especially in our advanced planning division. Matt, Tristan, and I really care about the city, and we're really, really trying to find the best solutions for each of those neighborhoods and the unique nature of them. So it's really exciting.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for answering all of my questions. I learned more about what you're working on in terms of the element update and actually basically the overview of what you're doing in your role. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and go into the audience question segment. Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get started. The first question is on Facebook. It's from Johnny Palacios. He's asking, is there new veteran housing under construction off of Matthews Road next to the VA hospital?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Is my answer. I'm not familiar. That might be a question for our economic development folks. If you send me an email directly, I can forward you over to the appropriate person who can answer that question.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Johnny, for your question. Sounds like a question for economic development. All right,
Yeah.
We've got another question. This is from Janae. She's asking, I've heard a lot about the planning and progress going on in South Stockton. Can you share a little about what's happening there?
Sure. So this is Tristan's project that he's managing that I mentioned is planning efforts for the 3 neighborhoods, which include the South Airport Way corridor, which is roughly from south of Martin Luther King Boulevard and south of there, sort of the area around the county fairground. That corridor is one of the 3 neighborhoods. A second neighborhood is the Gleason Park Little Manila historic area. There is a great historic community there and history there. And they had a plan that was pretty outdated that will sort of be updated through this project. And then also the A Station area, Cabral and East Cabral. East Cabral has really been not addressed. It's not part of the official downtown core that's defined in our development code. And it's really been ignored over the years. There hasn't been any real planning efforts that go over the tracks from the A Station to the east. So that area will be included in our planning effort. So all of those efforts kind of combined. They might have unique solutions for each area because there's unique issues in each area. So we really want to know what are the problems or issues or possible solutions in those 3 neighborhoods. And Tristan is really going out and talking to a lot of people and finding out. So he's kind of on a listening tour right now. Like, tell me your thoughts. What are your dream? If you had what's your dream solution for your area? What are the things that you're missing? Where are the gaps? And how can we help? And then we're going to study how can we solve those problems if we can solve them. We can't solve every problem, but
Right.
Is it finding funding or finding the right developer or updating a neighborhood plan or a corridor plan? Is it infrastructure? Is it housing? Is it jobs? Mixed use development or services in a neighborhood? Are there grocery stores? Is it walkable for kids to get to school? And, are there issues with sidewalks or trees? And so it's kind of like what's going
view.
on? Yeah, very much. Very much.
Okay. Thank you for answering Janae's question. And now I'm going to switch gears and we're looking at questions from Instagram or other platforms. So there's a question here from Sydney Oliveira. She's asking, are there concerns that an increase in housing may overpopulate the region?
Good question. I think every city has to anticipate population growth. All cities will grow, and it's planning. So the key is planning for where to place that housing so that it does not have a perception of overpopulation. We have a whole lot of vacant buildings if you look around the downtown.
Yes.
We also have a large homeless population and a lot of people who, young people who are living with their parents or parents living with their children. And so we have really an affordability issue. So the concern isn't so much overpopulation by building more housing, it's building housing for the people who are here and who really need it right now. And I don't think, at least in my personal view, that overpopulation, at least in the near future, is not a concern for the area. There's pros and cons. Once we have more housing, for example, in the downtown, you can attract more employers. You have people living there, and so it's kind of creating and looking at and studying not just one aspect, not just increasing housing. It's kind of all the moving parts. So working with our economic development folks to get good employers coming into the region, and working with our public works folks to say, okay, how are we implementing our public facility fee programs and CIP programs to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place for those folks, especially older areas that are outdated and our infrastructure is crumbling. How can we maintain those and update them? So there's a lot of kind of moving pieces to that, but I don't think there's much of a concern for overpopulation at this point.
I definitely agree with what you were just sharing. Any new housing coming in will hopefully actually just help to address the shortage for those who actually live here currently. Interesting. Okay, thank you so much, Cynthia, and thank you, Sydney, for your question. All right, we've got another question. This question is from Danny Lewis. He's asking, does the housing department work closely with the Parks and Rec department?
I'm not sure from what aspect. It depends. The housing division, I'll say technically is part of the economic development department and administers financial assistance for affordable housing. So community development, from the planning perspective, does work with the Parks Division of Public Works. We unfortunately no longer have a standalone Parks and Recreation department. Back when the city filed for bankruptcy, Parks and Rec was sort of split in between community services and went over to the library, and then also Public Works. So a lot of the parks work that's done now is done through contracts with consulting firms and handled through a lot of grants. So it depends on what the project is. Generally in planning, we don't plan parks, but we would say, hey, there needs to be a park located as part of this, huge subdivision, and this is the minimum size it should be, acreage based on the size of the subdivision, but we're not going to dictate how it should be designed or what have you. That would be through more of a public process through Public Works.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you, Annie, for your question. It looks like we've just got one final question. This is from Chris Tario. Chris is asking, what are the long-term goals of the housing department?
So I think the long-term goal is to get more housing built. We need to increase our housing capacity. As I mentioned, as you build at those higher levels, all of the income levels kind of bump up. So we need more housing built, just of every kind, every type. So we're looking at all housing typologies. So the typology might be a single family home, or it might be a fourplex, or it might be high density. We're really looking at missing middle type of housing. We could do a whole hour discussion on missing middle housing. But if you just Google missing middle and go to the missing middle website, Optico's is a consulting firm. They have a great website. So is that a strategy for infill? Is it putting a fourplex that looks like a single family home into a single family neighborhood where maybe there was a vacant parcel that no one's ever been able to pencil out, but it looks like a single family home, and so but it's going to house 4 different units. So maybe that's something we look at around, for example, University of Pacific or Delta College, or in the Midtown area where there's some larger homes, or we really look at what's appropriate and what the location is. Then we're also looking at income levels. Affordable housing, by the way, I think is sort of a misnomer, because when we're discussing affordable housing, a lot of the projects that might be called affordable, I think people have a negative view of, because they think that it's a negative thing, right? It has a negative connotation. But really, there are teachers that are going to be moving into these projects, and our service workers. So, you know, the local server at your restaurant that you go to every week is going to be the one living in the affordable project. So you could make, you know, $50,000-$60,000 a year and be considered eligible for an affordable project, depending on how many folks are in your family. You could make $80,000 a year and have 4 family members, and only one parent is working, and one is a stay-at-home parent. So, you know, I think it's really, affordability is a misnomer. So yes, we want to get more affordable projects, but we also want to get our just unit count up to, by default, make those kind of lower end units affordable just naturally, not deed restricted. They don't have to be subsidized. So I think that's a big piece, is we want to create affordability. We want to create a quality environment for our citizens to live. I myself live by Victory Park. It's a walkable, great area. We're looking at kind of all the pieces, you know, streetscaping and trees, and where schools located, and you know, access to resources, the grocery stores, and jobs. Wouldn't it be great to walk to work, you know? So all of those pieces, or jump on the ACE train, and if you work in the Bay Area, take the ACE train to work and come back to downtown Stockton, and, you know, go to your local wine bar and have a glass of wine, and, you know, go hang out at the library the next day. You know, it's kind of like all those pieces that make a city work. So we're really working hard to kind of find all those pieces and fit them together.
Okay, thank you. Multiple goals, multiple aims. All right. Thank you, Chris.
We have big dreams.
Yes, big dreams, big plans, and we're going to make it happen. So I just want to say thank you so much to you, Cynthia, for being our guest today, for answering all of the questions from me and from our viewers. I really appreciate having you here. Do you have any last thing that you'd like to share before we close out?
We really want folks to get involved. I'll say again, our website is stocktonca.gov/shape Stockton. Yes. Yeah, we really want you guys to get involved. We want to hear from you. And really, genuinely, thank you for having me. And it's been really fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we learned a lot about housing. And I want to say thank you as well to the viewers. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for asking questions. This was our first time streaming live to multiple platforms. So we were on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube today. If you missed any portion of the live, you can go ahead and watch it on any of those platforms. Please like and follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we are Downtown Stockton, and Twitter, we are at Downtown STKN. So with that, again, thank you to everyone, and I hope that you all have a great day downtown.